In this video, you're going to learn how to build your own AI image generator using Stable Diffusion XL and Bubble, which is a no-code tool that allows you to build web apps without knowing how to code. We're going to go from start to finish, so a completely blank app. You're going to learn how to connect to the Stability.ai API, which is how you're going to connect to Stable Diffusion XL. Stable Diffusion XL is a newer version of Stable Diffusion, which is more powerful and gives you better results than previous versions of Stable Diffusion. You're going to learn how to build a simple app like this with a prompt and an image result. So we're not going to go into as much detail in the design. We're going to focus on the functionality here of the app so that you can build this into your own apps as well. And so you can learn how to build your own app and extend this in whatever way that you want for your own use case. If you want to learn more about building apps with AI, check out NoCode MBA's Building Apps with AI course, where we have a lot more content on how to build AI apps using Bubble and AI APIs. Okay, let's go ahead and get into the video. So the first thing that you need to do is go to platform.stability.ai and create an account so that you'll have a developer account on Stability.ai. Once you do that, we're going to go to the documentation tab here on the top, and I'm just going to walk you through very briefly about what we're going to use to connect to the Stable Diffusion XL API. So if we go to authentication, the first thing that you're going to need to do is access your API keys. So you can manage them on your account page. So here on your account page, this is where we're going to actually create our API keys. So that way we can connect our Bubble app to Stable Diffusion. Now, this API key is kind of like a password into your account. So make sure you keep this a secret. I'm going to delete my API key after the video, so that way you won't be able to use it after seeing it here. So here I just created one. So what we can do is after you click Create API Key is go down to the bottom and we can click this I to actually show our API key. So that's as far as I'm going to get here in the developer platform documentation for now. We're going to go over to Bubble and then come back to this API key documentation and the different parts of the documentation later on. Okay, so here I am in a Bubble app. If you're brand new to Bubble, what you're going to need to do is create a Bubble account, create a brand new app. It can be a blank app, name it whatever you'd like. And then the first thing that you need to do is on this left side tab here, we're going to need to go to Plugins. You're going to have to click Add Plugins and then install the API connector. This is a really important and really useful plugin for Bubble, which is going to allow us to connect our Bubble app to external services, and in this case, the Stable Diffusion API. So you're going to install the API connector, and then I'm going to go down because I have all sorts of APIs built into this app already, but yours will be completely blank if this is a new app for you. And I'm going to go ahead and click Add Another API, and I'm going to name this Stability.ai Demo. Under authentication, we want to say private key in URL. And then here under key name, we're going to write bearer and space. This is just kind of the setup that most API authentication follows. So that's also something that's really helpful is by watching this video and learning how to build this API connection, you're also going to be able to connect to other APIs. So we're going to go back to our API key that we just created in Stability.ai. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and copy it. So I copied my API key, and I'm going to go back to Bubble now. And then here, what we're going to do is just do a space and paste in our API key. Actually, I made a mistake. Just copy and cut this entire thing, what you just did from the key name, paste it into the key value, so bearer space the API key. The key name is authentication. So I just made a mistake there, authentication. Okay, oops, authentication. Spelling can be difficult sometimes, so we have authentication here. And then under the development key value, you're going to paste in the exact same thing. So this is helpful just if you were ever building a Bubble app that had a development version. We're actually on the development version right now. You have to pay to publish to a live version of your Bubble app, but you can have two different API keys depending on the version that you're on, which can be potentially helpful, but not something you need to worry about right now. So just bearer authentication. Okay, great. Okay, sorry, I made one mistake. It's not authentication, it's authorization. Okay, so it's authorization as the key name. Sorry about that. And then the key value and development key value here are correct. So authorization is the key name for Stability.ai. It's a little different for every API that we're working with. And if we, okay, so now here on the left side, we want to go over to generation because we want to generate an image here. And then what we're going to do is do text to image. So you can see there's different functions here that we can call, such as image to image upscale. But what we want to do here is text to image. What we're going to do is go over to the CURL sample here because that's what we want to copy over into Bubble to help create our API call. What I'm going to do is go ahead and click copy, and I'm going to show you in Bubble how we can easily create a new API call without having to copy any of this code over manually. Okay, so here we are in Bubble, and under the Stability.ai demo API that we just set up, I'm going to import another call from CURL, just paste that in, and here we go. So a lot of what we need was just automatically generated for us, which is very cool. One thing we're going to do is we're going to delete the authorization bearer stability API key that it automatically did for us because we already set that up here in our overall API setup in Bubble. So I'm going to delete that, but these other headers we're going to keep. We need those. Below down here is the body of the API call. It's kind of information that we're sending to Stability.ai, and then they're going to send us back an image. This is very important to not, mess with the syntax. If there's anything kind of off with a quotation mark or a colon, it will not work. This needs to be valid JSON in order for this to work. One thing that we can do here in Bubble is use these icons here to have dynamic values. So what we can do is just add that in, and the text can be called, prompt. And then when you do that and click away, now we have a prompt, and we can put in the value, which I'll put in as a lighthouse on a cliff. I'm going to uncheck private. That's important, so that way we can dynamically change this text when we are building our app and users are using our app. So if you keep this checked, it won't work later on and you'll get stuck. So you have to make sure that that is unchecked. We also want to go ahead and make sure we're using it as an action. So that way we can use the API call within the workflow. Again, if you have this as data, it won't work later on and you'll get stuck. So we need it to be an action. The data type here is an image. And the reason I'm changing it to an image is because that's what this API is going to give us back. It's going to be an image. That's something where, if you're playing around with a different API and you're trying JSON and it's not working, but you think you're supposed to get an image, that's where in Bubble it's really helpful to know that and switch to image. There's also been times when I've switched to text for a text response. So just keep that in mind. The name, I'm going to call this Stability or Stable Diffusion or text to image Stable Diffusion XL. Okay. We're still missing the URL though, so I'm going to go back to the API call. So here we are in the documentation, and here is the URL. So what I'm going to do is copy that. Make sure you copy that whole URL. You can see it's a post, and what that means is it's basically it has to do with us sending data to this API and getting back data, getting back a response. And here we go. I'm just going to go ahead and paste in that URL. But as you can see, there's basically here a placeholder for the engine ID. And this is where we're going to put in the model that we want to use here in the API. So to get the engine name, we're going to go over to the left side here to engines, to the list, and we can see the example API call that they have. So this is a call to basically get all of the available engines, all of the models that are available. And here we can see the ID is Stable Diffusion XL 1024 V10. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. You might get something a little bit different if you're watching this video in the future. Months later, they might have different models. They very likely will have different models. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste that in our Bubble API call. By the way, it should also work just to manually type this in, but I'm just going to copy and paste it here. So here's the full URL. So we have our headers, content type, accept image PNG, the body type JSON. We're sending along a prompt. This is different kind of details that you can change about the response that we're going to get. We'll just keep it at the defaults for now. And let's go ahead and initialize this call. So initializing the call is something we need to do to make sure that it's going to work basically first. So it's going to do a test and making sure that there isn't any errors here in our setup. And then once it's initialized, we're going to be able to use it in our Bubble app. So I'm going to go ahead and click initialize. And okay, so it looks like there actually was an error. So let's try and debug this and see what might be going wrong here. So it says it's missing the authorization header. So let's see here. Okay, so I figured out the issue. It was a small issue that I made. Here under authentication, it's private key in header, not in URL. So it's usually something small that we're making a mistake on if you get an error. Okay, so now let's go ahead and initialize this call. So it's connecting. It's just going to take a second here. So it's connecting. Could take up to 5 or 10 seconds, maybe even a little bit more. And here we go. So as a result, we got this image, and it's really small, or it looks really small, and that's totally fine. When we're using it in our app later on, you're going to be able to get the full-size image on the app screen. But we know that this was successful because now it says reinitialize call, so we know it worked. An image showed up, so we know it worked. And we are now ready to use this API in a Bubble app that we're actually going to build. So that'll be the next step of this video. Be sure to continue watching to use this API in your own app. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the second part of this tutorial, which is actually building the interface for users to enter a prompt and get an image response through Stable Diffusion XL. So the purpose of this tutorial isn't to go into a lot of detail about the styling and what your front end is actually going to look like. The focus is going to be on the functionality because the styling would be like a whole different tutorial and would take a lot of time to go over. So I really just want to focus on the functionality here. So we're going to go on the top here, top left, and we're going to click add a new page. So I'm going to add a new page. It's going to be called, for me, Stable Diffusion XL. You can call it really whatever you want. And I'm not going to clone it from anything. So we're going to start with a blank page here. Okay, cool. And again, I'm not going to make the design super beautiful or anything like that. It's going to be focused on the functionality here. So the first thing, we want to click on this top left page, Stable Diffusion XL. What I'm going to do is change the layout to a column layout. So change it to column from fixed. This is basically allowing us to create a responsive design in Bubble, so it'll work on all screen sizes and is really what you want to do with all of your Bubble apps that you're building. So we have a column container layout here. And then what I'm going to do next is go to the top left here, which is where we're going to add an element to our page. And I'm going to search for a group element. and I'm going to drag that in, drag it across, and I'm going to change the layout here to a column. I'm going to change the name of this element by going to the top of this element details part of the page here and call it a container. I'm going to change the width, uncheck fixed width, min width of 0, min height of 0. I'm going to change horizontal alignment to center, and I'm going to add padding of 20 pixels on all sides. So now we have this little container on our page that we're going to put our inputs and outputs on. So now let's go ahead and add a text element. Make sure it's inside the container, and you can tell that because there's this plus and minus button to open up and see what is inside the container here. You can drag it outside and now inside by hovering it over the container. And there we go. For this text, again, we're going to go to the layout, uncheck fixed width, min width of 0, fit width to content, min height of 0. These are just little things that you kind of need to do every time you pull in a new text element or a new element to make sure it fits with the responsive design. And then here I'm going to say enter your prompt. Okay, enter your prompt. Then what I'm going to do is search for input, and I'm going to drag an input field underneath the container. So we have a text and input. We're going to go to layout again, uncheck fixed width, min width of 0. We'll keep height at 48. And then I'm going to rename it as input prompt. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is get a group, drag it on top. I'm going to change this to a column. So this group is going to be called group input. And we're going to put the text and the input inside this group, and you'll see why in a second. I'm going to uncheck fixed width, min width of 0, min height of 0. I'm going to click apply gap spacing between elements. This is really important for the design to just add some spacing, and you'll see in a second. Now on the left side, I'm going to drag this text element into the group, drag this input element into the group, and now you can see there's a little gap in between the text and the input. And this is just a really nice way to do that by adding the group and adding gap spacing. So just so you can see, if I change that to 100, there's going to be 100 pixels of gap in between, but we really just want 10 here. Okay, so we're entering the prompt, we're entering in the input, and then what I'm going to do is now search for a button, and you can see because it's in that group, there's also a gap in between the input and the button. And your button might have a different color. This is saved from a different design that I had already put styles in before, but it doesn't really matter what color the button is. And I'm going to name this button prompt. I'm going to say generate image is the title of this button here. I'm going to go to layout, uncheck fixed width, min width of 0, fit width to content. Okay, so now we have our group input. Okay, so before we actually create the workflow for that generate image, what I want to do is create a place for us to store the generated image in our app. Now there's two different ways that you can do this. One would be to go to the data tab, and we could create a new data type here to save the image that's generated. We also could create a custom state by going here to the page. You can create a custom state on any element in the page. And in that custom state, we could save the image to the user's browser. Now, the differences between that is if we save it to the database, we can use that image later on. It can be saved. We can save multiple images. There's a lot more we can do with that if we want to save it to the database. Saving it to the browser, it makes it very easy. It's just easy to quickly show the user the image. But if you refresh the page, then that image will be gone. So you would have to add another button to basically save it to the database if they want to keep that image. So there's different ways of doing it. In this tutorial, we're going to create a custom state and not save it to the database. But just know that there's different ways to handle the data that we're getting in from this workflow that we're going to create. So to create the custom state, I'm going to click on Page Stable Diffusion XL. So we're basically have the settings of the entire page here. I'm going to click this info button, add a new custom state. It's going to be called generated image. And the state type is going to be an image. And we're just going to create it. So very simple, create the image there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another group below. Make sure it's in the container though. So just make sure it's in the container there. This group is going to be called group output. I'm going to go to layout. Let's uncheck. Let's make the container layout a column. Uncheck fixed width, min width of 0, min height of, let's just say 20. Let's add a margin top of 50, so there's space between that input and the output. And then what I'm going to do is search for an image, drag that into the group output. We're going to, let's say, keep the aspect ratio fixed at 1:1 and make the width, let's uncheck minimum width, maximum width, let's say, of 400 or 500, minimum width of 300. Okay. Okay, great. So this is our output, but what we need to do is have a dynamic image. So it's going to insert the image and show the image that we just generated. Okay, so if we go to the dynamic image and click Insert Dynamic Data and search for Stable Diffusion XL, which is the name of the page. So if this was, named something else, we would search for whatever this name is of the page. We're going to go down to the custom state and insert the generated image. And then we're going to do the URL. This is what we need to show here as the dynamic image. So the generated image's URL. We can keep it at rescale for now. That's all fine. So I'm just going to rename this as image AI image. Okay. Okay, so we're getting pretty close. So now under generate image, I'm going to double click on that button. I'm going to click add workflow. And what we're going to do is click here to add an action. What we can do is search for, so if we go back to plugins, we can see that we named our API Stability.ai demo here. So if I go back to the workflow and search for Stability.ai demo, I have a different one because I was working on another API, but here, this is the one that we did in this tutorial, Stability.ai demo, and then text to image Stable Diffusion XL. Now, if this is not showing up for you, make sure that you have this API call as an action. If it's data, it will not show up. It needs to be an action to use it in a workflow. You also need to make sure we uncheck private. Actually, that doesn't matter, but here this needs to be unchecked as private. The body parameter needs to be unchecked as private, so that way we can dynamically edit it in the workflow. So we're going to keep content type and accept. We're not changing that. It's only the prompt we're changing. So here we're going to delete what we did in the initialize API call. We're going to go ahead and dynamically input the input prompts value. We know it's input prompt because if we go to the designer and we click on the input, we named it input prompt. So it's going to show up as whatever we name this input here. So input prompts value is important to put as well. So one thing we need to do before we do step 2 here is go back to the designer. We need to go to this page Stable Diffusion XL. We need to go to the custom state, and I'm going to change this to a text field. And you'll see why we need to do this in a minute. Even though it's an image, we're getting the URL of that image. So it's a text field. And then if I go to the image here, we're going to change it to Stable Diffusion's generated image. And we don't have to do anything else because we're just going to save the URL. Okay, so now if we go back to the workflow and we, in step 2, we're going to say set state of an element. We're going to choose Stable Diffusion XL, which is the page. The custom state is generated image. The value is going to be the result of step 1's URL. So we're going to get the URL from step 1. And then one more thing you need to do is we need to modify this URL. And this is something that I've learned just by building in Bubble, is the format of this URL does not include HTTPS, which is important to make the URL show up on our app. So what we need to do is add more here, and we're going to say find and replace. We're going to find these 2 forward slashes because that is shown on the URL that Bubble is going to provide us. And we're going to enter HTTPS : 2 forward slashes. So that's very important to add there. Okay, so we have those 2 elements. Now, the last thing that I want to do is add a loading element so that we know as a user when we are loading our image. So on the left side here, I'm just going to search for icon, drag an icon into our page here, and make sure it's in the container. Maybe I'll even put it in the group output here. Then what I'm going to do is change the icon color to black. So just go ahead and drag the color down to the bottom left. We're going to change the icon. If you search for spinner, there'll be a spinner that shows up. We will click make the icon rotate so that the icon rotates so we know it's spinning. I can change it to 50 by 50. I'm going to go inside the layout of this spinner. We're going to click collapse when hidden. And we're also going to uncheck that the element is visible on page load. So on page load, the element will not be visible. Then we're going to add a conditional, which is going to say when the Stable Diffusion XL, which is the page name, when the generated image is not empty, this element what we're going to do is click for the property to change when true, and you're going to click this element is visible and uncheck it. So basically what this will do is hide this spinner when the page has a URL. And by default, we are not going to show it as well, but we need to do one more action in our workflow here to show it when we click this button. So if we edit the workflow, I'm going to add a step in the beginning just by clicking right before step 1. And I'm going to say show an element. So you can search for the word show. We're going to show an element, which is the icon fa-spinner here. And I'm going to do one more thing, which is going to be set state of an element. I'm going to set the state of our page, Stable Diffusion XL. And we're just going to say generated image as the custom state and leave it blank. And I'm actually going to set that to step 1. So I'm just dragging it over to step 1. So what's going to happen is we're going to click our button. In the workflow, we're going to clear out that state. So it's going to be empty. We're going to show the spinner, and the spinner will continue to spin and show until step 4, when we add a value to that custom state, which is the image URL. And then in the designer here, if we go back to the conditional, you can see when that image URL in the custom state is not empty, we're going to hide this spinner. So that's the logic behind it. There's different ways that you could build that out, but this is how this way works really well here for our use case. Okay, so now let's put it all together and see if it successfully is going to work here on our page. So we can go ahead and click preview. Just going to refresh the page here. You'll have a debugger on the bottom. This can be helpful for debugging if something doesn't go right. I'm just going to set it to normal so everything runs like normal. And my prompt is going to be a whale jumping out of the water by the beach in the ocean. So let's click generate image. Okay, so this is where we can debug together and see what might be going wrong. So it looks like it finished loading the AI generation, but it's not showing up here on our page. And what I can do to debug this is first I'm going to click Inspect here on the right side. Make sure you search for Stable Diffusion XL, which is that element that we're saving the custom state to. And here I can see generated image. So I can see that we did generate an image. So let me copy that and let's open it up and see if it worked. Okay, so this is the image. So we know that it worked. We got the generated image. It's pretty cool actually that this did work. But let's try and find out why it's not showing up on our page. So I'm going to walk you through what I did to debug this. So here, I'm still in the inspector here. If I search for image AI image here, I can see that it's invisible. And I can see here that the image is showing up. So it should be showing up on our page. But for some reason, if I go down, I can see the height of this image is 0. So it's not showing up. Okay, so I figured out what the issue was. For some reason, this second group output for me, under the layout, this element is visible on page load is unchecked. So we want to keep that checked for this group, because otherwise everything inside this group is going to be hidden, which is why the loader wasn't showing and why the image wasn't showing. So now if we go back to our page and refresh, it should work correctly. So why don't we say the prompt can be a mountain range with snow on the top and a bald eagle flying above. And let's generate the image. So now we have our little loader here, so we know and we're able to show users that our app is loading. And it does take a little bit of time. The Stable Diffusion XL model does take longer than the earlier Stable Diffusion models because it's giving us a higher quality image. Okay. Awesome. So here we go. This is our image with the eagle. It really is high quality. I do think this is much better than previous Stable Diffusion models. The one issue here is we're still getting our spinner. So let's go back to our editor here. So this spinner should not show when the generated image is not empty. So then what we're going to do at the very end as well is we're going to say hide an element. The element is going to be the icon FA spinner. And this is just a way to ensure that our icon is going to hide at the end here. So we have our show icon, then hide the icon, just to be safe here. So now if we go back to our page, let's do one more test. Okay, so let's go ahead and why don't we have it generate a basketball hoop with a dog dunking a basketball. Let's see what it generates here. All right, cool. So this is the image here that it generated. Something that I'm noticing about Stable Diffusion XL is I'm able to get better results with a much less detailed prompt. So I would be interested to see what you can get with more detailed prompts here. I hope that you enjoyed watching this video and you learned something about how to integrate with AI APIs, in this case, the Stable Diffusion XL API. If you want to learn more about building with AI APIs and no-code tools like Bubble, click the link in the description or go to nocode.mba and check out our Building Apps with AI course, where you'll learn how to connect to a variety of different AI APIs. You'll learn how to set up AI embeddings with the Pinecone API. You'll learn how to build your own version of ChatGPT and much more. So we go into a lot more depth about how to connect to a lot of different types of AI APIs and build your own AI app. If you liked this video, be sure to like it and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our future no-code and AI content. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.